You are limiting your growth when you hold yourself to the standards and results of those lower than yourself in a domain you wish to improve in. People as a whole, they tend to do this naturally to avoid standing out from the rest of a crowd and be perceived negatively. But the only real thing that gets accomplished in doing this is that they hold themselves back from what they could be, effectively limiting their potential in this domain that they care about. Now, it should be fairly self explanatory as to why that's no way to live life. But to further iterate this fairly simple point, I can use the example of our potential and progress in this domain in the form of a race, one which involves every person in some way. You'll have people good at a skill and people very bad at a skill, right? It's all a spectrum. And to hold yourself back as a result of these lower standards of those around you and holding yourself to them is to effectively slow down in this race in which everyone is present because you do not see adequate competition. You don't see someone pulling you up. You don't see someone running faster than you that's propelling you to want to run farther and faster. Life is a race that rewards speed in this case, and slowing down or stopping is doing us no favors. Now, there's a few ways I've seen of combating this effect or of stopping or slowing down in the race of life and of these domains we care about. And the first, I'm not a fan of it, is to stop comparing at all and to run the race. So, doing this action that you want to get better at, and you run it for the sake of running rather than being better than anyone in particular. Now, this goes against the way we work, but I'll cover that later. And as we may expect, it doesn't work for most people. Putting work in, or in this case, progressing for progression's sake, tends not to be enough of a motivator for most people, or at least a motivator when beginning a habit. So this method of combating lower standards isn't going to be really effective for most people because it's not going to drive you forward. It's only going to potentially prevent you from moving backward, which is about the same as staying in the same spot. And thus I'm going to move to the second way of combating this effect, which is to compete with different people. Now, humans naturally have a tendency towards evaluating themselves in relation to those around them. And thus, if you are evaluating everyone around you as lower than yourself, you have less of a reason to feel insecure. You have less of a reason to get moving and start progressing, as to our brains, you're already winning. Now, insecurity is not a bad thing. I don't want to send that message, but it's useful when it's used on purpose. And the cure to this is, as I said earlier, finding and surrounding yourself with people that are higher up than you in the area you want to progress in. So, for instance, instead of focusing on those behind you in the race and thinking, well, I'm doing just fine, instead, you look beyond yourself, look at those ahead of you, and you try and chase them rather than stay in front of the ones behind you, because that'll propel you to move forward. It'll tend to make you feel more insecure in your position because seeing someone better than you is more of a negative emotion, which we are biased towards. I'll cover that later. And that'll make us want to improve that in some way to feel less insecure. And so we'll climb up the ladder as with our best efforts because of that. Now, if we take this back to real life, this doesn't mean you should ghost your friends and be a dick because they're holding you back or some stupid shit like that. Because that's inane and it's taking it too literal. What you should instead do is be conscious of what is aiding in your progression because that's always a good thing. Something as simple as like finding more avenues to interact with people that are better than you in that field. So finding more ways you can look at people that are ahead of you in this race will always be good methods of seeing how you measure up because that's fundamentally what we are very in tune to. I'll talk about that later. Spending more time with these kinds of people, or in our case, with the race, focusing more on those ahead of you, will shift who you compete with mentally without alienating your friends like an idiot. So instead of shitting on the guys behind you and just being a dick to them, cutting them off, you just focus on the guys ahead. Personally, I think that with enough time and experience in the craft or field of choice, we will naturally gravitate towards stability and a sense of security towards our own skill sets or capabilities within said fields. This will eventually allow us to spend time with those above or below us without feeling too much of a sense of security or of not being enough, because we've found where we stand in relation to those around us. So you won't feel as though you're too far behind in the race because you know where you are and you're comfortable where you are. You can feel secure in where you are. And that is a good thing.